as secondary symbols, as they may be called by contrast with the naive symbolism of naive states of mind, increasingly replace the direct substance of things and values in practical life, the importance of intellect in the conduct of life is extraordinarily enhanced. As soon as life no longer moves between particular sense impressions but is determined by abstractions, averages, and synoptic views, then, particularly in the sphere of human relations, a more rapid and exact process of abstraction will produce an advantage. If public order today can be secured by the mere appearance of an official, whereas in former times it required physical force, if a mere signature binds us unconditionally, both externally and internally, if a mere hint, or a facial expression, suffices among civilized people to indicate a lasting relationship which, under less developed conditions, can be shown only by lengthy explanations or long-term behavior, if sacrifices can be imposed upon us by written accounts which could be wrested from more ignorant peoples only by the real working of the factors conceived, then this significance of symbolic things and acts is obviously possible only as a result of greatly enhanced intellectuality, and of the existence of such independent mental power that the particular details of phenomena no longer require attention. I have made these observations in order to clarify the role of money too. In this trend of cultural development, the increasingly influential principle of economizing strength and materials leads to more and more extensive experiments with representatives and symbols that have virtually no relation to what they represent. The same course is followed when operations with values are carried out by a symbol that loses more and more any material relation to the specific phenomena of its area and becomes merely a symbol. This form of life not only presupposes a remarkable expansion of mental processes, consider, for instance, the complicated psychological preconditions required to cover banknotes by cash reserves, but also their intensification, a fundamental reorientation of culture towards intellectuality. The idea that life is essentially based on intellect, and that intellect is accepted in practical life as the most valuable of our mental energies, goes hand in hand with the growth of a money economy, as our further discussion will show plainly. Intellect is also undoubtedly sovereign in the field of commerce, and especially in financial transactions. The growth of intellectual abilities and of abstract thought characterizes the age in which money becomes more and more a mere symbol, neutral as regards its intrinsic value. Renunciation of the non-monetary uses of monetary material. It must be kept in mind that thus far we have only established a trend of development which began when the intrinsic value of money was coordinated with all other values. Thus, some other conceptions have to be disproved which apparently coincide with our theory that money has no intrinsic value, insofar as they emphasize the distinction between money and all other values, and thus seek to prove that money cannot possibly be a value of the same kind. As is so often the case, this establishes in a rigid form and by anticipation what can be established only by endless approximation. In arguing against the dogma of the intrinsic value of money, we should not become victims of the dogma that money is valueless. An error into which the following notions might lead us. It appears that even the most useful object must renounce its usefulness in order to function as money. If, for example, in Abyssinia specifically cut pieces of rock salt circulate as coins, they are money precisely because they are not used as salt. On the coast of Somaliland, pieces of blue cotton cloth, each 2 ells long, used to circulate as money. This was a considerable progress over the use of cloth money that was cut and composed arbitrarily, but nevertheless it indicates a tendency to abandon the use of cloth as cloth. The possible use of gold and silver for technical and aesthetic purposes cannot be realized as long as they circulate as money, and the same is true of all other kinds of money. The various uses that the material of money has for our purposes must all be renounced if it is to be used as money. As soon as such materials reveal their practical, aesthetic or other value, they are withdrawn from circulation and are no longer money. All other values may be compared with each other and exchanged according to the measure of their utility in order to acquire a specific value, but money is kept completely apart from this series. For as soon as it is used in the same manner as the value that it buys, it ceases to be money. It may be part of the unique suitability of precious metals as money material that they can easily be restored from some other form to the form of money. Nevertheless, at any given moment they have the choice of being either money or jewelry. That is, of functioning either as money or as use value. It may appear that money is then assimilated again to the other categories of value. For if I buy a yard of wood for fuel, I value its substance only for the heat that it produces and not for any other possible use. In reality, however, the situation is quite different. If it is claimed that the value of money consists in the value of its material, this means that its value is embodied in the qualities or powers of the substance which are not those of money. The apparent paradox indicates that money does not necessarily have to be based upon substances that are intrinsically valuable, i.e., valuable in some other respect. It is sufficient if the ability to function as money is transferred to any substance, the other qualities of which are quite irrelevant. It remains to be seen whether the abandonment of all those value functions that support the theory that money must possess intrinsic value justifies the conclusion that money can be only money and nothing but money. The point in question is the very important phenomenon of an object that has several functions of which only one, to the exclusion of all others, can be realized, and whether this realized function is modified in its significance and its value by the retreat of the others. In order to understand the coexistence of different possibilities, it may be permissible to point out first how the succession of diverse functions affects the one that finally survives. If the repentant sinner is given a higher value in the moral order of the world than the righteous man who has never erred, then this valuation of the moral superiority of the sinner is not derived from the presently existing situation, for the ethical content of this situation is, according to our assumptions, exactly the same as that of the righteous man, but from the preceding situation, in which the moral behavior was different, and from the fact that this situation no longer exists. Again, if freedom and self-determination is restored after there has been obstruction of our activity and external enforcement of its direction, our actions then acquire a particular feeling of well-being and value, which arises not from their content or success, but exclusively from the fact that the form of dependency has been eliminated. The same activity, following an uninterrupted series of independent actions, would lack the attraction that springs simply from the passing of a preceding form of life. This influence of not being on being appears, somewhat modified and more obvious in spite of the differences of content, in the significance that immediate emotional life has for lyrical or musical art.